Welcome back to another episode of the Empowered Plates, Empowered Lives podcast. It's your healthy habits and lifestyle coach, Giovanni, and I help those with endometriosis and polycystic ovary syndrome reduce chronic pain, eliminate stress, and minimize heavy or irregular periods. Y'all, we got Les in the studio. Let's go. Les with endoQueer, but man, before we get too far into this episode, make sure you grab your anti-inflammatory guide, link in the description of this video. But you already know what time it is. Vibe with me, y'all.
Y'all make sure y'all
Welcome to the Empowered Plates, Empowered Lives podcast.
Hey.
Okay, Les with the jig. I appreciate you, Les, for coming through. Go ahead and introduce yourself and let them know who you are.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name's Les Henderson, pronouns she, her, they, them. I'm the founder of endoQueer. For those of you that aren't familiar, endoQueer is a support space for LGBTQIA plus individuals experiencing endometriosis and other similar illnesses. So thank you, Giovanni, for having me on tonight.
Nah, man, I just appreciate you for even being here. So you already started with the endoQueer. Like, what inspired you to even start endoQueer?
All right. You know what inspired me? It would be a lot of tale of events that happened, but mainly it was in 2016 when I experienced my first lung collapse. And I just went through so much around it, and I wasn't finding supportive endometriosis spaces at that time. And this was before endometriosis became, kind of more of a household name you didn't hear of it that much back then like you do now. And I felt so depressed. I felt alone. I went into a dark space, which I'll probably discuss more in this program tonight. And I just didn't want any other LGBTQIA plus person, especially experiencing endometriosis, to experience what I did. So it started off with just a small, like going on Facebook, me and a friend, and I think we were at the time we did LGBTQIA with endometriosis, and then that kind of fell apart. But then later on, especially during the pandemic, was when it would really ramp up to how most of you all know me today. And when we were all in the house during the thickness of the pandemic and everyone was doing virtual things like this, people were inviting me to speak about my story, and from there it just continued to take off.
So we're not going to just speed past that. You said in 2016 was your first lung collapse. Yeah. What all did that even look like for you? Like, what was happening that day, and why do you believe your lung collapsed? Like, what do you think caused it? Like, walk us through that journey. Like, you just, my lung collapsed, and then I created endoQueer like that.
Yeah. And I guess for now, I've had several more after since then. So now I'm kind of like, my lung collapsed. But really, I would say that day I was working for a nonprofit at the time, and we were having a conference at a hotel, like a lot of conferences do. And I noticed that day, I thought I was just anxious because I had been having some issues, at this now ex-employer, but I was having issues with this particular employer. So I thought I was feeling anxious, like, I have to get this conference right. This has to go right. So I thought it was just anxiety. I thought, and at the time I was also still a heavy cigarette smoker. So I was thinking that, okay, maybe it's all these cigarettes. Maybe all this is just catching up with me. And I was like, okay, I'll be all right. And at the time, at this particular hotel in DC, there was a McDonald's across the street. For those of y'all watching this, are from DC, or, or kind of know DC, around in around southwest southeast kind of junction. There was a McDonald's and kind of in the Navy Yard area. And so I walked from there to the hotel that I was at, and I felt so out of breath. It was only like across the street, and I felt like I've been running a marathon. Again, I'm thinking I'm just anxious. So I shower, lay down, get dressed to go downstairs, do all the conference, activities. And it just wasn't getting better. Like, it just was not getting better. And
What were you
so,
feeling? Like, what did you feel? Like, did you just feel
oh,
like lack of energy? Did you just feel like shortness of breath?
yeah.
What does this even feel like? Like for
Oh,
someone who's never had a lung collapse before, how do they like what did this even look and feel like?
I was out of breath. Like, I just
Okay.
felt out of breath. Like, I was wheezing.
Mhm.
Another symptom people may want to realize, if you're kind of wheezing or have like a lot of dry cough, you could be shortness of breath just if you like even just walking a very short distance. Like, for instance, my very last lung collapse that I experienced back in, it was in 20, I want to say it was fall of 22. And at my current job, it's about a 2 block walk from my current job to the nearest metro train station. And I felt so out of breath. I wasn't even running, just walking. So even if it's short distances and you're just out of breath, you may want to get that checked into, and especially if it goes on for a number of days, like for a day or two, you don't want to take any chances. I mean, hopefully, fingers crossed for you that it's good news that that's not the case. But for me, I was out of breath that entire day. I was still out of breath when I was like at the end of the day. So around about 5, I had did a whole like 7 a.m., 5 p.m. that day. And then around 6, I gave up. It just took a Uber to the nearest urgent care clinic. And I went and I told the urgent care team, I've been having shortness of breath all day, just walking across the street, just walking around the hotel and the conference area. I felt so out of breath. And so they literally gave me a chest x-ray. I was in radiology, and I was waiting on the results, and they came back in the room, one of the patient rooms I was in, and they were like, Miss Henderson, we're actually calling you an ambulance right now. You want to contact your loved ones or someone that can meet you at the hospital, as we're getting you an ambulance right now. You have an 80% lung collapse. And it was just so scary. It was almost like Giovanni right then. It was almost like my world just stopped. Kind of like when you're watching TV and you see in a movie and someone's going through something very traumatic and the little buzzing sound will come on, like they're just mute to everything around them. That's what happened to me. It was almost like once they said 80% lung collapse, we're calling you an ambulance. It was almost like everything around me, it just went beep. Like it was just so surreal. Because I've been to the ER before, but not behind this. I've never had an ambulance called on me. So all of this was just so traumatic. So the woman I was seeing at this particular time in my life, she had rushed to the urgent care, rode in the ambulance with me, went to the hospital. So to go through it, how they found out how I had endometriosis and how that affected the lungs was, I was on my period during during this lung surgery, and they had an OBGYN to kind of look at and correlate it. And I was telling them symptoms I was having, like every time, like each month, every menstrual cycle, I would have this shoulder pain that would kind of just connect. It was radiate like from menstrual cramps up the shoulder pain. And every time I would kind of breathe in and just do a full breath, it was like it just radiated. It was like a weird sharp pain, and I would get that every period. I always thought that it was just, my bad luck or what seemed
I
like.
thought you were going to say, I just thought it was normal because you know how we take the
Yeah,
like period pain and heavy periods, and we just be like, because it's our normal, because it's something we've always experienced or we experience it regularly, that
right.
we just think it's normal. And so, like, you've always felt this sharp pain, cramp, travel up into your shoulder. For how long before this first lung collapse, Liz?
It was about, gosh, for years. As ever since I started having periods, when I was a child, it was heavy. It was heavy. Then when I became a teenager, it just I would throw up almost every month. I would just throw up, and I would just feel these intense pains. It was so bad I would have to stay home from school. Like a lot of people, that went through this and had these bad pains. But then I began noticing, maybe when I actually hit around 18, 19, early 20s, that's when I would feel that pain. And of course, everyone's like, you need to leave these cigarettes alone, because everyone would just tell me it's smoke, because I was a heavy smoker for a long time, up until that first lung collapse when I stopped smoking cigarettes.
So that was it for you.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was it. That was it. I remember I had a pack of cigarettes once when I got out, when I finally got home. That I still had it at my apartment, and I literally walked to the bus stop that was kind of in front of my apartment building, and I said, "Here, y'all can I don't want them. I don't want them." So that was the end of smoking cigarettes for me.
Yeah, and for me too. That was the
Yeah.
case. Like, I am good. 80%. And so this OBGYN was a part of the surgery. You went in there.
Well, not quite, not quite.
Okay.
They had, because I was like the mystery case at the hospital for this surgery, because it was like, okay, everyone's like, have you been in an accident? I even had some ignorant ass, doctors like, were you taking too many hits of a bong? Were you smoking too much or you smoking too much on a blunt? But it was just the tone that these doctors were saying it. And I'm like, no, it wasn't that. But and so everybody's like, are you sure you wasn't in a car accident? I said, I think I would know if I was in a car accident. So nobody knew. So I was really a mystery case. They were asking me these questions, but that's when, because I had been diagnosed with endometriosis a year prior, before all of this happened. So that's when, but then when they looked, they were like, we had spotted endometriosis nodules on your lungs. And then they showed me kind of how it correlated. So that's how they were able to determine that, unfortunately, my endometriosis had progressed to thoracic endometriosis, when you have endometriosis in your lungs.
And so how has this like impacted your life? Like, how have you been able to really navigate medical challenges now that you know like endometriosis is like in your lungs and not in the typical space people think it's in? Because a lot of people think it's just a woman's health issue that's just in the womb, when endometriosis is a full body experience and it can go whenever, wherever it wants to. So have you been able to really navigate the healthcare system with this pneumothoracic? That's it, right? Um,
Yeah, I had that's the technical name I was going through. Well, at the time, spontaneous pneumothoraxis. Then later on, I would learn that, for other lung collapses I would experience, they would call it catamenial pneumothoraxis. So so yeah, but I remember when they died, when they first, like I said, that day at the urgent care, that they were like, spontaneous pneumothorax, you have an 80% lung collapse in layman's terms, get you in an ambulance. But it would be a challenge. It would be hell, to be honest. Excuse my language. It was just rough, because endometriosis in general is still an illness that people like to relate to femininity. They like to relate it to cisgendered women. They like to, and myself, I'm still a woman. I still identify as a woman. I'm just a masculine woman. I mean, that's point blank. So it was still took doctors aback. Um, I think just with different identities having endometriosis. I mean, we still hear about unfortunate cases. And so it's bad enough, with Black people and the disparities that we already have in the healthcare system. But then when you add queer part to it, and when you add, when you add in gender nonconformity, that's when it's almost like people just kind of lose it. And then I really began to see and understand the real biases in the healthcare system. I mean, I saw it before then, because sometimes, even to this day, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I'm still angry. I still get a little angry from time to time when I've had lung collapses, because I'm like, well, damn, if people had just believed me in the first place when I came to them and said I was having all this pain, I think my periods are abnormal, something else is going on, and no one believed me. And by the time I was diagnosed, and then it was just too late, because by then apparently endometriosis had unfortunately traveled to my lungs. Or it would be situations, for instance, like with my partner I'm seeing now, and she's more feminine appearing, and even my ex back in the day, it feminine appearing as well. I would go to the doctor, and they would always think that, like, sometimes that my feminine partners were the ones getting the help. In fact, with my recent partner, about 2-3 years ago, went to the doctor, and the medical staff, someone's like, hey, can you get up from this, because she needs to sit right there. And we're both like, even my girlfriend's like, hey, she's the patient, this is my partner and she's the patient. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, and by then I'm enraged. I'm like, God damn it, I'm the patient. So, that's when they, like, oh, I'm sorry. So it's still these perceptions of who's going through, endometriosis. And I'm like, I'm over this. I'm sick of this. I've seen so many other people have DM'd me or emailed me and let me know about, their troubles of dealing with endometriosis, and just not really being able to get the health care and the proper things that you need because of biases. And and especially as we roll into LGBTQIA plus Pride Month, um, we're still going to talk about these disparities, and it's important to know that, hey, it's not over. We know that in certain places things have gotten better, but then, of course, unfortunately, a lot of places are experiencing different rollbacks. They can't get the gender affirming care that they need. They can't get exactly what they need. And then when you add in the economic disparities, where a lot of people in the community can't even get the employment that provides the medical care that they need to really be able to get the help they need. I'm thankful and I'm fortunate where I know right now I have my day job where I'm thankfully I get health benefits where I can go see certain specialists. But I've been that patient trying to get assistance with no insurance. I've been that patient on Medicaid. So I've been through this with all different stages, and it is a big difference depending on on what type of insurance you have, or if you're coming there with absolutely no insurance at all, or versus if you have Medicaid. It is a big difference, I've noticed. In fact, that one doctor, I've been going to this doctor for a while, and then I've recently gotten some new insurance, and they're like, oh, well, let me do these extra tests. Let me show you this, this little what we do here in this lab. And I'm like, as long as I've been coming here, I've never been in this room. I didn't know you did tests like that. But it was different because now I had this insurance,
this type of coverage.
Yeah. Because I was like, as long as I've been coming here, you've never said, oh, let's do these particular tests. Oh,
I think that's really sad. And I'm glad that you're speaking on it, because it's supposed to be a system to truly help people. And because you go there to get your information to know what's really going on, so then you can make your educated approach and insightful approach on doing what you believe is the next best steps for you in regards to your healing journey. It's sad that you have to go through these experiences just to figure out what's going on with you. you know, and we hear people, like you said before, black women, black people, you know, but specifically women talking about they're in pain and they're constantly saying their pain is real, and you're not hearing them, you're not listening to them, you're not following through on what it is that they're saying is the issue. And then you prolong things, and then it comes to almost a life-threatening situation, and now things are real. What
Right.
have you experienced in regards to treatment, actual treatment, when you know they know that there's a problem and now you're looking at them to actually treat you? What treatment what type of experience or biases have you felt, or mismanagement of issues? How have you been mishandled, Les, as an endometriosis patient in the healthcare system trying to get help?
Ooh. Well, all I can think of all the times I would first go to the ER to get help, and it was like I would hear them, the medical teams in the background, like, just, she probably has a STD. She probably has a STD. You know, give her some ibuprofen and test her. I would hear them, and I'm yelling, I know I don't have an STD. God damn it! I mean, I was just in this, especially back in my hothead days years ago in my 20s. I mean, I was cussing up a storm in the house. I was livid. And I would get this for a very long time, or, oh, just go take yourself, you know, some Tylenols or something like that, or, you know, you need to, you know, or maybe, you know, it was just a lot. And then, or it's, let me put you on some birth control, or the worst for me. Now, for some of you all watching this program tonight, it may work for you, Lupron. If it does, wonderful. But for me, that just it was hell. It did not work out. Um, for me personally, if I don't birth, you know, children has just never been something that I've like aspired for. So you know, for me, I was like, I just want a hysterectomy. I'm over this. You know, if I want children one day, I'll just adopt. You know, I'm an auntie. So I'm like, I'm fine. But I would experience doctors like, I'm not giving you a hysterectomy. You never know. I'm not giving you a hysterectomy. I recall one doctor in the Kaiser system year about around the time in between my first and second lung collapses. She was literally like, and I was 30 at the time. She was literally like, she looked me dead in the face and said, I am not giving a 30-year-old female a hysterectomy. You can try this Lupron. And at that time, I was at another particular job at this time that wasn't so open. It was very strict. And at that point in time, I was the only person in my household with an income. So I was like, okay, I need to keep the income going. I can't afford to, you know, continue to be calling off sick or taking the mornings off, trying to get it together. So I said, if this will stop me, if it's going to stop my periods for a while, let's just do it. Stopped my periods. That was the only good news about it, but it was horrible. I would experience just these. I mean, of course, took me into like hot flashes. I felt the menopause. At the time, I was always taking public transportation. I was taking the bus to work, and I had this coat on, and I had it open. It was one time, it was in the winter time, but that's when I started the Lupron at that particular time. And I had my coat on, but I had unzipped it, and there was a little sandwich shop next to the building I was working out of. So I went in the sandwich shop. I got off the bus. Remind you, it's early in the morning when it's really cold, like 20 degrees. And I got a cup of ice. I mean, just a cup of ice. My coat is open. I'm literally chomping on ice. My coworkers are looking like, girl, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Everybody's looking around at me like, what in the world is going on with you? You know, and then nobody was messing with me, but I kid you not, I would go into one of the bathroom stalls. I would just start crying.
Mhm.
I didn't want people to see me crying, but I was crying. I didn't want to be touched. I didn't want to be hugged. I think it was the beginning of the end for the woman I was seeing at that particular time, because I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to process anything that was happening to me. I just felt like I was in this whirlwind. People weren't who they said they were. People I thought were friends weren't around. So it was just a shock to my whole system. But when I honestly look back at that particular time, Giovanni, I see that was a turning point in my life that kind of really, it just, everything for me changed. Just like nowadays, I'm like pre-lung collapse versus now, because just so many things have happened in my life. It was like huge shift in my life after that happened. I mean, I had went into a very dark place with the Lupron. It was just, it was horrible. The birth control. I mean, after a while, I felt like that didn't work. And then the more I began educating myself on it, I knew that wasn't the solution. And it was certain other things like fibroids and just other things that was starting to get worse. So I couldn't. I was like, so then after that, I started getting more into natural practices. I was like, I need to look into natural medicines. People that were telling me that had went vegan or vegetarian, they're like, you gotta do more of this type of stuff. You gotta eat more raw, and this will help you. And then I just began to start educating myself on different things. Like I began going more to natural doctors. I went more to like natural food markets.
How was
And,
your treatment with those natural doctors compared to the doctors in the healthcare system? What was that experience like?
well, I felt like they were more caring, first of all. And they weren't so quick to just pick up their pen and pad, be like, okay, here, this is what you need to do. Or, all right, hey, or be like, hey, what pharmacy, are you going to? Hey, this is where you can pick it up. It was really more of, okay, if you do these supplements or you follow this plan, it will work. Now, me, I didn't complete, I kind of had scaled off of that plan, but it was certain things that helped me. Like for me, I have noticed that when I stopped heavily drinking alcohol, because I'm a crown girl. I loved my Crown Royal. I would have my Crown and Coke every evening after work. I mean, I love my Crown. But then I noted, and then whenever I would go out, I would have drinks. But I noticed that I would be in so much pain. I felt so bad. And people were always trying to warn me, even when I was having all these horrible periods and before I knew what endometriosis was. So even taking it back, people were like, Les, you need to kind of chill with the alcohol. That alcohol, I think, is doing a number on you. And I'm like, oh, it can't be that. No, 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 it ain't that. But I did notice one time when I was on my period and I drank and I felt so bad. I think I had to run out of the club. I went on the side of the club and I threw up, and then I knew it was just time for me to go home. I mean, it was
happened to me one time, and it was before I even knew I had endometriosis, and I had one drink with one of the bros and one of my sorors. It was after work, and we was just, I think we met at a gas station. We was all getting gas and saw each other. And you know how some people have that bar in the car.
Yep, I know about the bar in the car.
And he fixed a little drink and he was talking, and my sorority sister, we was talking to him, and it was like a little Coleman love. And I just had a little bit. I didn't even have a lot. And when I tell you, I got home and I was just sick, like throwing up. My stomach just felt bad. And I'm thinking, like, I know I'm not drunk because clearly I didn't even have a whole cup. And I'm somebody back in college days, Everclear Kool-Aid and everybody on the yard drinks, the Omega oil, the blue juice, all of it. What is going on? But I honestly believe that alcohol and that sugar, when it's something about endometriosis and that alcohol. Like it doesn't budge anymore when it's out and it's there, because that was in April of 2019. And
Yeah.
it wasn't until August of 2019 that I had that second flare up. Again, I had no idea it had anything to do with my period. Just like you at the beginning. Like you was like, I was just feeling the sharp pains. I had no idea it was really, the period when I was losing my breath before that first lung collapse. And that one was so debilitating of a flare up. And I'm not like someone like you. I was blessed enough to not have painful periods every single time. There were certain symptoms that I thought were normal because people told me it kind of was, or gave me a reason of why it was okay for it to be that way, for me not to have any, blinkers out there on like what's happening, what's going on with my body. But girl, that right there, that pain right there, it took me out. And I was like, well, I'm done with the alcohol. I tried even wine after that. And even the wine was like, nah, leave the bottle alone. Yeah. So I was just like, okay, cool. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So that hysterectomy, she said no, because you were 30. Any other issues in the healthcare system that you faced in regards to bias or mistreatment when you were just trying to get some help? And then, if you don't mind, like, did you know what stage of endometriosis you were diagnosed with?
At this point in time, when I was denied the hysterectomy, no, I did not.
Okay.
It would be later on when I would ask people, because it even took a while, even with endometriosis, people like, oh, well, just do this and that. It was still very dismissive, even after my lung collapses. And unfortunately,
I ain't dismissing something after somebody whole lung collapse, Les. That don't even make
right.
sense.
I know it. I know it doesn't, but it was just still a lot, and there's still a lot of healthcare bias. I mean, I would go to different appointments, different doctors. They would just be very dismissive, like, okay, well, just take this birth control. A lot of times it's like, here, take this birth control, be consistent with it and be on your day. But I'm like, wait, I've been taking this and I feel like things are getting worse. And by worse, it was just all of a sudden I started developing these fibroids. It just started to become like just almost like a chain reaction. And I was like, I don't want to take this anymore. I don't even like what these pills are doing to me. I don't like what the Lupron is doing to me. It has to be another solution. And again, I been completely over it. I was just completely over it. I was completely just kind of getting dismissed with this. I would have 4 more collapses.
What do they know what's causing the collapses? What triggers the collapse, or just happens?
Yes.
Like what triggers
so it? In my diaphragm, they believe it's coming. The endo comes up through my diaphragm because there's endo that's been spotted there too. And it comes up, and when it kind of comes up, and it came up through the diaphragm, and so it's just kind of there. It's still kind of there. I recently had a hysterectomy last spring, May of 23, because I was just over it. I'm like, so I was actually so relieved that when they called, and when my OBGYN at that point that did the surgery called me and said, we can do this hysterectomy. I was jumping for joy. I was at work. I went into a conference room. I was like, I was just very happy about it.
How has life been now?
Honestly, I mean, there's still challenges because again, there is still I still have some endo in my lungs, but it was like starting there for me. Now, it's not the solution, and it's a hysterectomy just doesn't alleviate endo. And for those that are watching this that still want to birth children, it's not a last resort. There's special endometriosis specialists that you can work with. Some of them, even if you don't have insurance, they do like they can do certain payment arrangements with you. And they can at least counsel you and provide some type of coaching and guidance on what your next steps should be. For me personally, I've been wanting the hysterectomy for a very long time. I was like, and even before I even knew endometriosis, because my periods were just so horrible. But for me, of course, early menopause, the sometimes early menopause now, just because I went into just instant menopause with my total hysterectomy. And for me personally, my quality of life, I do feel like it's improved.
That's
However, with menopause, sometimes I just get hot. The one thing I joke about is that now the wintertime doesn't seem that bad to me. Like honestly, I can have on a little hoodie. I noticed this winter and I felt all right every once in a while. You're not cold, or even now, especially if I'm at work or if I'm in a lot of heavy air conditioning, people like, you're not cold. And I'm like, no, I'm really not cold.
well, I'm
So
glad. What made you, because we talked about this before. We talked about your other attempt of about to have a hysterectomy before this
oh
one. Right. And so
man.
I kind of like, I was about to ask you what made you so excited and so confident to go through with this hysterectomy after the first hysterectomy attempt wasn't ideal. So like briefly walk us through that first attempt to finally getting someone to say yes to a hysterectomy to
Sure.
now the jumping for joy running in the conference room. Yay, me. Because
Sure. Sure. So back in 2015, like this was a year before my lung collapse, and I was felt so relieved because there was a doctor, and he had found this was the doctor, ironically, that had actually diagnosed me with endometriosis. That finally said, "Yeah, all signs point to you having endometriosis." I was like, yes, it's going in a good direction. And yes, we're gonna schedule your hysterectomy. So I had found out in the previous appointment I had endometriosis. Then that next appointment is okay, gonna schedule you for a hysterectomy. I'm like, yes, finally, a OBGYN that is not dismissive, that's giving me what I need and is listening to my needs. Da da dum. Then he says, came back in the office like a day before my hysterectomy was supposed to happen. He gave me a tube, like to inject, myself in. And now looking back at the story, it was just. I mean, I wasn't laughing then, but now I'm just thinking back, like, thank the Lord, I took that tube because something about the whole, it just didn't feel right. I was like, I better get some guidance with this because he was like, oh, just inject it, and then you come in in the hospital in the morning for your surgery. But at the time, I lived across the street, from a pharmacy from where I used to live, and I talked to the pharmacist. I said, hey, my OBGYN, he wants me to inject this, in myself, before my hysterectomy tomorrow. And the pharmacist was like, I'm actually very glad that you came to me, because if you had just injected this full tube, you would have accidentally killed yourself. And I complained about the doctor. I was just so shocked. I'm like, wow. So I was actually so relieved that my gut told me. And so anybody watching this too, go with your gut sometime, get a second opinion. You don't always have to go with the first opinion.
or third or
Or
fourth.
third, yeah, four fifths, just keep going. And I realized that because I've been there where there can be disparities. I've been there where a public clinic was pretty much all I had. I've been at that point in my life. So I understand for some people it's not as easy as just, oh, go to this specialist, keep going to all these doctors. I know that that's a luxury for a lot of people. I understand. I've been there, but you don't have to go with the first opinion. Like, I wouldn't even be on this program tonight if I had did this. So I wouldn't have even had my first lung collapse, because I would have already been dead. Not to be morbid, but that's just what would have happened. And so I filed a complaint about the doctor. I heard the doctor was reprimanded because that was just insane to provide that kind. And
What was his thought process behind that? Like, because
well,
normally when you take a prescription in, but he didn't even give you a prescription, he just gave you the actual injection for you to take it right at home. So you didn't even get it from your neighborhood drugstore. So like,
right.
what was his old, like, how did he?
The pharmacist was like, what your doctor, what he was supposed to do was guide you on this process. This should have been something honestly done at the clinic,
Mhm.
but this wasn't for you to just do it at home. Or even if you were going to do this at home, he should have gave you better instructions, not just take the whole. And
Take
I
this
even
before
said
you
it.
come.
Yeah, and I even asked at that doctor's office, I was like, this entire tube? It's like, yeah. So I'm just very thankful I got a second opinion, and I went to a pharmacist to, for assistance with that. But that was the process. Really, it was supposed to be, monitored. It was supposed to be monitored shots, but that wasn't the case. So I'm definitely glad that, that didn't happen. So for the longest time, I was like, okay, I'm gonna get through this, but I'm gonna keep asking doctors for this hysterectomy. People are like, well, before we do that, because then you risk osteoporosis, and you're too young to have this bone trouble. You get a hysterectomy, you might start having heart trouble. So doctors just kept saying all this stuff. I said, I understand, but I'm over this. I'm really over this. I'm over these bad periods. I'm over these painful periods. I'm over taking things to suppress the periods. I'm just ready to just get it out. And they said, well, let me go over the risk of this, all of this before you do this. So then fast forward to the OBGYN that would perform the surgery. She was like, yeah, we can do the hysterectomy.
I'm
Um,
glad they finally heard you out, Les. That's
yeah,
a beautiful thing.
yeah.
And I'm still shocked with that doctor for just sending you home with a tube for you to do it. Like, it's not like you giving yourself an insulin shot and you've been taught
Right?
how to do that. Like, this makes no sense of just like go home and inject yourself with no real instructions or even a diagram of what you're supposed to be doing, how you're supposed to be doing it.
Yeah.
It baffles me. Did you ever have any type of experience with like your lung collapses of being mistreated whenever you would go in for a
Oh
lung
my
collapse?
God, yeah. So the first time I was in the hospital for about 2.5 weeks, because it was like I was wait because I came in through the emergency room, and but then so it was a process. It was a crowded hospital, like these days hospitals tend to be. And I noted, and the doctors were just so dismissive. I want to recommend also to everyone out there, to make sure they see people coming to the hospital. Make sure that you can even even if you have to FaceTime someone, or I don't know, or just have some kind of support person there, somebody from like your church, maybe someone you're close with at school, maybe just somebody, to be there with you. Because sometimes if people don't see like people around you, or they think that no one cares about you, that makes a difference. I did have people there, but sometimes I noticed it was a difference between when the doctors came in and I was by myself versus when people were there. And so the first time this my lung collapse happened, there was a snowstorm, so a lot of people weren't like coming. So it was a very different treatment than, let's say, other lung collapses where it was nice out and people could come. But it was like it was just when they would, so the first one they kept rescheduling, and I would go on a fast. I would have to fast the day before. I couldn't eat. So when they kept pushing it, I was becoming hangry, because it was about 3 days in a row. I'm like, I'm not eating, yeah, I'm chewing on ice. I'm hungry. When are y'all gonna do the surgery? So I was becoming kind of angry. I was hangry. So that's when the doctor's like, she's getting hysterical. Put her on Xanax, or what do you have like an anger problem? I said, I think you would too if you haven't fucking eaten for 3 goddamn days. By then I was snapping, I was losing it. They were like, we're gonna put her on Xanax. So it wasn't, but and at first I didn't think much of it until I would talk to some white friends of mine that have gone through some of these same issues, but they were like, oh my God, that wasn't my experience at all. I and one of my friends, in fact,
Les,
they
not the voice change.
Well, I'm
This is
serious. I
my
mean,
experience at all.
yeah, but that was, I mean, I'm not trying to be, but literally one of my friends, where she also dealt with endometriosis, she dealt with not quite a lung collapse, but we had kind of gynecological surgeries in the same hospital. Like, oh, well, that wasn't my experience at all. Another white friend of mine, we both had fibroid surgery in the same hospital. I had one where I'm literally screaming, I'm in pain. That was another situation where I had a UFE, but my meds wore off and I'm literally shaking in the bed. I'm like, I'm screaming. But then I talked to a friend who is white who didn't have that experience. We're in the same hospital for the same thing. Like, oh, well, that wasn't my experience at all. I'm so sorry. And, and I don't mean, but I mean, because they were just so calm but empathetic. And I'm just like, what in the world? So other people would say, yeah, I was in the hospital not for a lung collapse, but for something similar, but that wasn't my experience at all. So
So it sounds like every single time you probably go to the doctor, you're having some type of triggered trauma, because your experiences are none other like anybody else in the same exact hospital.
Yeah, and I, of course, for these last two lung procedures, I try to avoid this particular hospital if if possible.
And why is that?
Because I didn't personally like the treatment. It was the staff just was kind of just the staff was off, and I realized it's a high pressure environment. But if I'm getting some one type of treatment, but then someone else isn't, in this particular hospital, there's been issues around, I think, the LGBTQIA plus patients, and other maybe other POC patients. So I think there is issues at this particular hospital. But luckily, for my last two collapses, I went to another hospital, and the care was a lot better.
Do you
Um,
think because of like your identity that you got that chest tube without being under any type of anesthesia? Or do you
oh
think they
yes,
just was trying to provide you with this very timely service and care that they just forgot to put you underneath? What do you think was the reason why you would get a whole, what was it, a chest tube?
yes, yes, yes. And for everyone, for context, yeah, I already had talked with Giovanni. So, like with that chest tube, this was when my first lung collapse, when the ambulance brought me in. And so already the medical team, they're saying all this stuff. Oh, you had too many hits, you're blunt. You had too many of those backwoods. You all the puffs of a blunt bong. I mean, it was just all these things. I'm already just upset. I'm hysterical that all this is happening. And they're like, all right. So they said, we're gonna put the chest tube in. I think at the most they might have put a little numbing, they injected me with some numbing fluid, but it didn't really numb it. I wasn't under anesthesia. I felt it. And they was like, okay, I'm gonna slit you right here. And they put the chest tube in. I was crying, I was holding on to my then partner. I was screaming. Even the nurse was coming in, grabbing my hand. I was shaking. I was hysterical because this was very traumatic to me. And today, even to this day, when lung collapses happen, it's not even just the lung collapse. I'm thinking more of like, oh shit, I got to do this chest tube. But I'm pleased to say that at this other hospital, it was a smaller tube. It was just a better scene. Now, I think that with maybe because I came in through the emergency room, it was, of course, they had to just quickly stabilize me and try to get that tube in. But it was just the remarks that was happening. It was like, come on, you got to toughen up. You got to deal with this. That was it. So I would experience that a lot. Like, hey, just toughen up. Because like I said, perception. And so when you are more, now it's black women in general, they already masculinize black women in general, no matter what you look like as a black woman. But when you're a masculine presenting woman, a lot of circles they treat you like a man. It's just like, okay, toughen up. You want to people have this horrible mentality. You want to be us? Come on, you gotta take it. Can't be that sensitive. So it's also just a lot of perceptions too. And that's what we have to change, because a lot of people aren't getting what they need because of biases. I mean, people across in the community, throughout the community, are killing themselves because they can't get the support. You're not getting the societal support. You're not getting the economic support. You're not getting the healthcare support and all that. It's like a volcano until it just bubbles up.
Yeah, and honestly, that's nothing to play with, because like you said, people are killing themselves.
Yeah.
That's a huge issue. And while they're sitting here telling you to toughen up, no, you take a more customer sensitive approach to actually providing care.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
you're here to provide a service, not tell your patients to just toughen up because of the way you want to treat them.
Yeah.
But Les, your story has been featured by Vice, Cosmo UK, and in medical journals. How has sharing your story on such platforms influenced your advocacy work and the perceptions of endometriosis in the public eye? Because now you just brought it about. Lives are at stake here. It's one thing to have a struggle with endometriosis. It's another thing to say, now I have to advocate. I have to use my voice. I have to be visible. Tell me more about that.
It's very humbling. It's very just here, and then just people saying thank you for sharing your story. I'm trans with endometriosis. I'm a man with endometriosis. I'm also gender nonconforming with endometriosis. I'm a femme lesbian with endometriosis. I'm black and queer with endometriosis. I'm disabled with, so just all these people from different walks of life and different identities that have been so inspired and empowered, by all of us telling our stories. Representation matters as well, because it's one thing. Great, yeah, I'm glad to meet more black people with endometriosis, but it's another thing when black, queer, the gender nonconforming, appearing, all those things make a difference. And that's why it's important for each community to show up. And we can't just be fearful. We have to, because what do they say, um if you stay silent, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. So you have to, we just have to continue to advocate and speak up. And yeah, when people ask me to um come on their podcast, or hey, can you come to this conference, or hey, can you come to my event, or hey, can you I'm writing this blog. So it's it's just, for me, it's about getting the story out there. And if my story, I just want my story to empower others, because as I mentioned, I never want anyone to go through what I did, with endometriosis. Sometimes I am still tired. I um sometimes I have to just really balance myself during the day. I have to watch what I eat. I have to, like I said, I kind of, for the most part, I really cut back alcohol. Pretty much, probably, I cut back alcohol, I'm going to say, by 98%.
Go,
I,
Les.
I'm not totally.
Choosing you. Go, Les.
Now, some people may dispute that and say, well, I drink alcohol, endo, and I'm fine. Great, that's you. But for me, I know I had to stop. For me, I still have a drink here, really, here and there, maybe. But honestly, I can say by 98%, I've just cut back.
I like that you said you have to tell your story. And that you wouldn't want anyone to go through what you went through. And mine is kind of like the opposite. Like, I really want to tell my story because I want more people to be able to get a faster diagnosis and be able to see what their issue is on my end. Because my first flare up was in April 2019, and it was a lot of stress, work, personal life, all of that stress really started to say, hey, you got a problem in here you didn't know about,
Right.
That was April. And then August, it happened again. And my nurse practitioner, who looked like me, my sorority sister, was like, you need to go get some imaging. We need to go see what's actually going in there. Go to the ER, telling me to go to the ER because we need that imaging. Go to the ER, and they saw a large cyst on my right ovary, and they wanted to admit me. And I was like that buzzing sound you heard. When I heard cyst, I was thinking benign or malignant. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what's happening right now. I wasn't expecting all of this. And so I was like, I'll just follow it with my OBGYN. You know, I don't want to be admitted. Let me go to people I kind of know versus just being into a system now and you just start figuring things out and just start telling me all of this other stuff. Like, let me talk to the people that I kind of have built a relationship with. And so when I go to my OBGYN, you know, she talked to me about birth control. She talked about me wanting to have kids and offer the birth control as a way to help with the pain. But I told her I wasn't always in pain. Like, it doesn't happen regularly. So if it's not going to cure anything, I don't want to take that route. And so her thing was to go see a specialist. And so the specialist was her husband. And so I'm just like, you see how this alignment is working for me?
Absolutely.
And so when I go see her husband, then it's now you go see the endocrinologist. Now that I'm talking to these people, you know, the facial hair, the irregular periods. Now, okay, PCOS prior to not having an appetite for so long and having to do things to even get an appetite to want to be able to eat, to even enjoy the food that I'm eating. Then it was, let's have a colonoscopy, because my great aunt had colon cancer. So it's like, now you do the colonoscopy. So I'm seeing all the specialists and I'm going through all the things. And then March of 2020, right before the pandemic, I had my excision surgery and it's stage 4 endometriosis. That says nothing about what you went through and all the pain you've had at such a young age versus what I've experienced. And so for me to not have so many painful days and nights and months and getting all of this information, it was just like, nah, I was privileged by this opportunity to go through a system, because it all started with someone who knew me, who loved me, who could hear me and care for me because they cared for me. Does that make sense? Yeah. And it was like, I have to make sure that not only do I tell my story because I have a good story to tell, but it's people like my nurse practitioner and people like my primary care physician that allow the proper chain of treatment to go on, that those are the type of people you need in doctors' offices. Those are the type of people you need helping treat other Black women. So that way they're heard, they're seen, they're loved, and they're going through these things where it's not taking so long to now lungs are collapsing and people are collapsing and people want to kill themselves because they're not being heard. That right there is why I need to tell my story and create a space for more people to tell their stories, so they know that some people can get it right and other people got it all the way wrong. And we got to keep turning the volume up on this thing and let people know that you're worth it. Your empowered life is worth it. So you deserve to find a way to push through and find the right people for you to help you get the help that you need.
Absolutely.
So that is what I feel like. So I know you're telling your story. I'm telling my story. And that's the whole reason why I have this platform, so people can tell their journeys of strength. Because no matter how many times you done been down with a lung collapse, Les, you still keep getting back up. And you're not getting back up with only you in mind. Like, you getting back up and you're making sure that your story is reaching other people so they're inspired and they're not saying, I don't want to do this no more because nobody listening to me and the pain is unbearable, you know? Right. So one other question, and then we'll get into the last two. What's next for you in regards to endoQueer? What are your future goals and how you're really taking this supportive space and trying to, you're not trying, you're doing. What are you doing to move the vibes forward for endoQueer? What's the future?
There are so many things in place. I don't want to spill the beans on it yet, but there are a lot of things in place. For some of you all that may have already been familiar with endoQueer, be patient. It's coming. What everyone's been asking for, a lot of things are coming. I can't. It's a lot going on behind the scenes, and I'm just absolutely over the moon about that. I've been blessed with some opportunities. So please stay tuned. And this will help with just being able to really have a better and even wider reach, just to, really help the community with this. And even allies, just anybody that's really going through a tough time, just knowing that people are there for you. You are not alone, and this space is only going to get bigger, and I cannot wait to share it with you all. Just, I'm on Substack at endoQueer at Substack. Also, you can follow me at endoQueer, like it says here in the caption, endoQueer, on all of the social networks. You can email me, endoqueer@gmail.com. You can check out the website at endoqueer.com. So, just feel free to reach out anytime, and just be patient. It's growing. I'm so excited. I can't get into it right now, but I'm very excited.
So since you couldn't give us that, I'll take another approach for people just to get a little bit more insight on endoQueer. What made you even start endoQueer instead of just being in the spaces that were already established?
Well, that's interesting, because when I had my first lung collapse, that's when I found out it was due to endometriosis. That's when I really took this seriously, and I was trying to find support groups, because at the time a lot of groups were like, a lot of people were like, I don't know what that is. People were kind of making fun of it, and I really needed that support. And so one group I had found, I was excited. I was like, oh great, this is a group on endometriosis. But then I began noticing I wasn't getting any more emails. I'm thinking, okay, maybe this group became defunct. But then other people said they had just went to a meeting, like a few nights ago. And I'm like, what's going on? So I contacted the leader of the group, and I said, hey, what's going on with the group? I'm not getting any emails anymore. And she was like, Les, I'm sorry. It's just that some of the women are uncomfortable, with your presence in the group. And I'm like, what? Why? I said, I'm still a woman. I'm just masculine appearing. I just look like a dude, but I'm still a woman. And I was like, yeah, well, I think it makes some of the women, uncomfortable. And so after that, I'm like, what in the world? So it would be a lot of instances like that. It was another group, I was trying to join, where it was other Black people in the group, but they were like, yeah, it's a lot of Christians in this group. Less, you know what I mean. And so that was some of the things I was running into. I'm like, okay. So I finally found a group that had more Black people. I'm Black, yes, but then I'm queer. And for a lot of us as a people, we're still a religious group of people. Not all of us, but religion still pretty much controls a lot of the Black narrative, which unfortunately tends to be very anti gay. I'm not just going to say homophobic, because that means you have a fear. At this point, a lot of this is just anti queer, anti gay. So I was like, well, gosh, what the hell? What am I? I'm feeling alone. And at the time, I didn't see any other groups like this. Like, okay, I'm Black, I'm queer. Where can I go? So that's when I just said, let me and a friend that also has had endo, and we created a little Facebook group. We're like, let's just see what happens. And there was a few speckles of people, but we both weren't into Facebook like that, so it didn't really go anywhere. So I think I want to say what really kicked it off, besides earlier when I mentioned the pandemic, was somebody had tried to connect me with the endometriosis specialist at the time, but unfortunately at this particular time I didn't have the insurance I had now, and I couldn't, and I wasn't, and at the time I wasn't getting paid what I get paid right now. So this particular specialist was out of reach, but they emailed me back and they were like, I was so inspired by your story. I feel so bad that I can't help you. But I want to connect you with these groups, with this group. So they connected me with the Endo Summit. And the Endo Summit I told them my story and they invited me to the endo and race panel. And I swear, every since that virtual panel, everything just changed. Like all of a sudden, people were reaching out. In fact, what was really starting to happen, because originally I think I was just on Facebook, people were DMing me like, "Hey, your picture and your endoQueer logo was in my doctor's office, like LGBTQ endometriosis support," because somebody took a picture.
Go,
I was
Les.
like, oh my God. Like it was so crazy. So yeah, it was like people like, yeah, my doctor told me to contact you. And I was like, wow. So it was just so, and then the invites, like I said, this was when, it was everyone was doing virtual stuff. So yes, that period was terrible. And again, I give my condolences to anyone who's lost people in this pandemic, because technically we're still, this pandemic has not gone away. But I'm sorry for people that really lost people, especially during that time. But for me, that time, it helped me to calm down a little more. Even though I had another lung collapse during that time, which was really scary, being in the hospital during that time and not being able to have visitors and all of that kind of stuff. But to go back, so it just kind of grew and the invites grew. And, and then media sources, like what you said, like Vice and Cosmo UK, started reaching out to me. And so from there, that's when everything just continued to grow. And that's kind of, what happened just for me, starting really sharing, getting more transparent and sharing my story. And I mean, it could be scary because you never know. People are like, are you ever scared that your employers are seeing this, that they're going to think you're too sick for the job? I'm like, you know what? I can't hide about stuff, anymore. Whatever is going to
I think
happen,
there's power in owning your story,
it
and
absolutely.
whatever is not for you because of who you are and what your story is just not for you. And I think
Yes,
you're courageous and bold enough to know that, and you've gone through enough to know that. And so I'm just glad that endoQueer has such a bold and courageous leader like yourself that knows the power of owning your story.
thank you so
And so
much.
that was good. So thank you for walking us through at least the creation of endoQueer, since we don't get to know what's on the horizon. So last two questions. Give some tips to the male role models and girl dads as they are needing to be more a part of the conversation when it comes to girls and coming up with these menstrual cycles, and are showing certain signs and symptoms of things that are not normal. I know you might have watched, but Beneath the Belt, Below the Belt,
I did.
the documentary, and there was one girl. Her dad just was really there the entire way, picking her up, taking her into the surgery places, and hoping that she could get some help. And I'm not quite sure what exactly happened to her mom, but for me, it spoke out. It spoke volumes to see a father so engaged in what was going on in his daughter's life. And I feel like we get into a space where period talk or menstrual talk isn't something a lot of men talk about with their partners or even their children, or younger people. Can you give some tips or just a little advice on how they could better be a part of the conversation and be more of a support, and as well as you talked about it at the hospital, an advocate to just be around?
Be an advocate, listen, and be supportive. The worst thing you could do is just dismiss them like, oh, that's some female-ish, oh, let me get my mama involved, let me get my auntie, let me get, a woman involved. No, you have a role in your daughter, niece, whoever, cousin. You have a role in this. You are who they look up to, who they need, and they need your support. So if there's anything, you got to get over that. You got to, take them to the doctor, take them to the OBGYN, get it, just be an advocate for them, stand up for them in the doctor's office, make sure they even get to the doctor's office, sit in there with them, just really listen to them and try to educate yourself online with the information. Like, for instance, not endometriosis related, for instance, but I've had a lot of men say, thank you for just being you. My daughter's gay, my niece is gay. Thank you so much, for living your life, and you've been helping me with, how I can approach my gay relative. So just in general, just really being there for your child, your niece, anyone that's going through this very unfortunate illness, to just be an advocate and be supportive and to listen to them and to take them seriously.
Thank
And
you.
again, there's some resources on a lot of sites, a lot of pages. Anyone in LGBTQIA plus community and even allies, you can endoQueer site. We have some resources. More is coming on there. We have resources. There's other endometriosis people as well. And then I know Giovanni mentioned below the belt. I was on a below the belt panel a while back as well. So it's plenty of resources there. Indo Black is a great resource for black population period going through endometriosis. Also, you have a lot of nurses. You have a lot of people. Here even with Giovanni, she's a healthy habits and lifestyle coach, like you see. You can reach out to her for advice and for coaching. It's so many of us out here with resources to help you. If you're watching this evening, you are not alone. Please reach out to somebody. You can email me, but just reach out to somebody.
Thank you, Les. I appreciate that. Last question. If you could have a meal with any historical figure, who would it be and what would you all eat?
Historical figure. Oh my gosh. First, I would definitely have a ribeye with some mashed potatoes and some green beans.
Okay.
Either that or I will take some baked chicken with some macaroni and cheese, some baked macaroni and cheese, and some roasted Parmesan asparagus. It's just one of my favorite things to eat. Those are my two favorite meals. Historical figure. I would love to have a meal. Gosh, this is so hard because there's so many people. But if I could bring her back to life, Octavia Butler, I would love to have. I would love to just sit down, with her, and just because just her books and everything is just so inspiring. Also, I'm trying to think historical figure. It's just so it's so difficult because there's just so many people that I admire and that I support. I would also, I guess I would say I want to have a meal with now historical alive or
It's all
historical.
up to you. You get to define what historical means to you.
Okay, well, let's see. Octavia Butler. I would love my Angelou if I could bring her back. Current, our former president Barack Obama. I would love to, sit down with him, and have a meal with him. I can tell he's still, be a really, great guy, to do this. And also I would like to on a fun note, I still want to sit down with Whoopi Goldberg. She's still somebody, despite some things that went on, but I think she's really been educating herself with endometriosis. I would love to sit down with her, and have a meal. Just so many people that if Michael Jackson was alive, I would like to have a meal with him.
This is a very interesting table of people.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to talk to all of them while you eat this plate?
Yeah, I would probably end up getting the talking and realizing I've only eaten a few bites, but a lot of them are talkers, so I would just kind of listen. Yeah,
I got you. I love this. This is a pretty interesting table. You got a lot of people sitting at your table. Got a lot of empowered lives sitting and eating
Yeah.
with your empowered plate. I see what you did there, Liz. I got you. Well, if you want to, you can let everybody know one more time where they can find you, where you can be reached.
Sure. Reach out to me. Email endoQueer at gmail.com. You can go on, I would recommend like Instagram, Facebook at endoQueer. I even have a private Facebook group at endoQueer. You could go on the website. You can, go on Substack. I'm even available on Substack as well. So at endoQueer. So, just find me, reach out to me, say hello. Just, feel free to reach out.
I love it. Thank you, Liz.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for being an amazing guest on the Empire Plates, Empire Lives podcast and walking us through your story but most importantly, through your journey of strength, and continue to just be you, because being you is causing a lot of people to still be here today and giving them hope. And that's what life is all about. So your legacy is going. So keep going, Les.
Right.
Y'all, it's been another amazing episode here on the Empire Plates, Empire Lives podcast. If you forgot to grab your anti-inflammatory guide out of the description of this video, go on and grab it now because it's free. But I want you to be free of pain, eliminate that stress, and most importantly, start regulating your period. So grab that anti-inflammatory guide. And if you're looking for a coach, a healthy habits and lifestyle coach, you don't know where to start because changing your whole lifestyle is a whole thing, because you got to grieve the life you were just living. You could get that support too. Click the link in the description of this video and let me talk to you, and let's figure out how I can help you go through this journey with you and just empower you and support you, because I want to see you win, because you deserve it. Y'all, if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you never miss another episode, a short, a video, a mukbang live, because we got the Nourish and Flourish vibes on the YouTube channel as well. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast distribution platform, give me a rating. Make sure you're following the podcast. But most importantly, thank y'all for vibing with me. I love you. Be well. Be easy.